We often take the simplest things for granted. Like, you ever just slice into an onion and think about what's really going on in there?
Yeah, more onion, right.
Exactly. But what if there's more to it? What if those layers are hiding secrets we've been tossing out without a second thought?
Well, that's what we're diving into today. Our listener sent us a really interesting collection of material all about onions, focusing on their nutritional value and all the health claims surrounding them.
It's true. The listener really went deep. We've got studies breaking down their antioxidant power, investigations into bone health and allergy relief, even potential benefits related to chemotherapy side effects.
Wow. Quite the range.
And for our listener who's all about efficiency, getting to the heart of the matter quickly, our mission is to extract those key insights about onions, separate the solid evidence from the hype.
Because, let's face it, those health headlines can be pretty enticing. But what's the real story?
Exactly. We're here to offer a clear, evidence-based perspective on what onions might genuinely offer. So let's start peeling back these layers, shall we? And speaking of layers, one of the first things that jumped out from the listener's sources was that the part of the onion we typically discard the peel might actually be the most valuable.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? What we often toss without a second thought turns out to be a nutritional gold mine. The research shows that the outer layers, those just beneath the papery skin, are where the highest concentration of antioxidants is found.
And the difference is pretty dramatic. We're talking like 10 times more antioxidants in the outer layer of white onions compared to the inner core. 10 times. That definitely makes you think twice about how you prep your onions.
For sure. And when you consider the role antioxidants play in protecting our cells from damage, finding such a potent source in an unexpected place is pretty remarkable.
Totally. And your sources also pointed out that not all onions are created equal when it comes to antioxidants. There seem to be clear winners and losers, so to speak, depending on the variety.
Right. Based on several studies, yellow onions generally pack more antioxidant punch than white onions. But the undisputed champion in this category, red onions, they consistently came out on top in terms of antioxidant content.
So if someone's really looking to maximize their antioxidant intake, red onions should be the go-to. But it's also good to know that even those basic white and yellow onions still bring something to the table. They're not nutritionally insignificant by any means.
Absolutely. While red onions might lead the pack, the key takeaway is that incorporating onions into your diet, whatever the color, contributes to your overall antioxidant intake. Now, the big question is, does this antioxidant power translate into concrete health advantages for us?
Right. That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And of course, there are those eye-catching claims out there that make you wonder if they're too good to be true. Like one that popped up was the idea of onions boosting testosterone.
Ah, yes, the testosterone booster. This is a perfect example of why it's so crucial to examine the evidence carefully. The initial buzz around onions and testosterone stemmed mainly from studies conducted on rats. And not just any rats. These were rats that had undergone a procedure called testicular torsion.
Okay, this is where it gets a little weird. Basically, researchers induced a specific injury and then observed the effects of onion juice. And from this, the idea that onions could enhance male performance took off.
Yeah, it's a classic case of extrapolating results from animal studies to humans, which doesn't always hold up. And as the sources clearly explained, when the effects of onion extracts on human testosterone levels were directly tested, those claims fell flat.
So, lesson learned when it comes to human health. We need to prioritize human studies. Findings from animal models, while useful for initial research, can't be directly applied to us. All right, so maybe not a testosterone booster. What about bone health? I remember seeing some interesting, though somewhat conflicting information on that front.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. There was an observational study involving older white women that found a correlation between eating onions daily and having a 5% greater bone density compared to those who rarely ate onions. And that's pretty significant, especially since it was potentially linked to a 20% reduction in hip fracture risk.
Wow, that sounds promising. Just adding more onions to your diet and potentially reducing your risk of fractures like that, it's definitely an appealing thought. But I do remember the source material also mentioning that this was an association, not definitive proof, that onions directly cause the bone density increase.
Right, you've got it. Observational studies can point to interesting connections, but they can't establish cause and effect. Other lifestyle factors might be at play. And looking at the broader research landscape, the relationship between onions and bone health becomes less clear-cut.
Because, if I'm remembering correctly, there were those animal studies, again, hinting at a big jump in bone density after giving rats onion extracts. Those rats seem to be living the good life.
They do pop up a lot in the early research phases, and those animal findings did spark hope for a natural osteoporosis treatment. However, when they tested onion juice on actual humans with osteoporosis, it didn't live up to the hype. Despite the initial enthusiasm, drinking onion juice just didn't show significant bone health benefits.
So, a bit of a bummer, especially with the growing interest in natural approaches to conditions like osteoporosis. It highlights the complexity of translating promising findings from the lab into real-world benefits for people.
It really does. And this pattern initial excitement from animal studies that doesn't always translate to humans also emerged in other areas covered by your sources, like allergy relief.
Oh yeah, the shallot powder study. It seemed like there might be something there at first, but
Ultimately, the results didn't reach what we call statistical significance. While some people in the shallot group did experience improvement, we can't definitively say it was because of the shallots. It could have been random chance.
so another potential benefit that didn't quite pan out, according to the research, and it seems like efforts to use onions to minimize the harsh side effects of chemotherapy also face some initial roadblocks, at least in certain areas.
That's right. They looked at whether eating fresh yellow onions could help protect the liver and heart from toxicity in breast cancer patients undergoing doxorubicin chemotherapy. Unfortunately, the results didn't show a meaningful benefit in that specific regard.
So at this point, you might be thinking, okay, so onions have antioxidants, but where's the concrete evidence of benefits for human health?
Yeah.
And that's where the research takes a really interesting turn, because there actually was one area where they did find a significant positive effect.
Yeah, this is where the onion story, as revealed by your sources, gets really compelling. Turns out, eating fresh yellow onion showed a clear benefit for breast cancer patients specifically going through doxorubicin-based chemotherapy.
And this wasn't just a small preliminary study. They went all out with this one, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it was a randomized, triple-blind, controlled clinical trial, the gold standard of clinical research. They had one group of patients eating a lot of fresh yellow onion, about a whole onion per day, and another group eating a much smaller amount, about a third of an onion per day.
And the results were pretty impressive, particularly when it came to blood sugar levels and insulin resistance, which we know can be a problem with doxorubicin.
Exactly. The high onion group saw a significant decrease in both their blood sugar levels and insulin resistance compared to the low onion group. In fact, those levels actually tended to increase in the low onion group. And this is important because doxorubicin can worsen insulin resistance, potentially leading to more health complications.
So we finally have a clear, measurable benefit demonstrated in humans. It sounds like for breast cancer patients on this specific type of chemotherapy, incorporating more fresh yellow onions into their diet could be a genuinely valuable strategy, obviously in consultation with their healthcare team.
Absolutely. It shows how even common foods can have complex interactions with our bodies, particularly in the context of medical treatments.
All right, let's bring it all together for our listener. We've uncovered a lot about onions today. What are the key takeaways, the actionable insights we can glean from this deep dive?
The main takeaway is this. Onions are definitely a good source of antioxidants, especially concentrated in those outer layers and particularly in red and yellow varieties. But the robust clinical evidence for broad health benefits across different conditions is still somewhat limited.
However, there is that one notable exception, the potential for fresh yellow onion to help manage blood sugar and insulin resistance, specifically in breast cancer patients undergoing doxorubicin chemotherapy. That's a really important and targeted benefit.
Exactly. And for our listener who values practicality, here are a couple of actions to consider. If you're aiming to maximize those antioxidants from your onions, maybe try being more strategic about how you use them. Could mean incorporating those outer layers into your cooking somehow, as long as they taste good and are prepared safely, and perhaps choosing red or yellow onions more often.
And when you see those exciting health claims about any food, including onions, remember to approach them with a critical eye. Look closely at the type of studies being referenced. Are they in animals or humans? And what does the overall body of research suggest? One promising study doesn't automatically mean there's a miracle cure.
Right. And that benefit we saw with chemotherapy really shows how specific dietary changes can be helpful in certain situations. For those individuals, discussing with their doctor about possibly increasing their fresh yellow onion intake could be worth considering.
So while onions might not be a cure-all, they offer nutritional value, especially with those antioxidants, and show potential for very specific health benefits, like that blood sugar management during chemotherapy. It's a good reminder that even the most ordinary foods can be surprisingly complex.
Definitely. Even something as simple as an onion has layers of potential that researchers are still exploring.
And on that note, here's something to think about. What other everyday foods in your kitchen might have unexpected effects on your health that are worth investigating?
That's a great question to ponder. Hopefully, this deep dive into the humble onion has given you a more discerning lens for evaluating health and nutrition information, always encouraging you to look deeper and consider the context and strength of the research behind those claims.
Until next time.
See you then.